In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about core exercises and core training for tennis players. So we're going to be looking at some of the best exercises that we can start to do and bringing together the different components. So what we're not going to try and do is do the tennis, swing or anything like that. We're not trying to swing the racket. What we're going to do is we're going to break down the movement and try and build that into exercise in a gym environment. So when you go into the gym, it's going to be much more effective exercises than just going in and doing a bunch of sit-ups and crunches because, one, they're just not good for your core. Two, they're not good for your spine, and they don't really get you any stronger. With regards to the core anyway, they may get specific muscles stronger, but the core's not getting any stronger. So we're going to look at that in 4 different parts. So part number 1, we're looking at contract, relax, contract. Now this doesn't mean full contraction, full relaxation, full contraction. It might be mild contraction, mild relaxation, mild contraction, mild relaxation, so on and so forth. What does that mean for the tennis swing? Well, as we initiate the backswing, there will be a mild contraction through the torso. As it swings through the air, it will start to relax. As we then get to the back and initiate the swing, there's again going to be another contraction of the torso. As it swings through the air, it will start to relax. And as we hit the ball, it will start to contract again. So that is probably the most fundamental part of what we're going to be talking about. So what we have to understand is that with training, we're not necessarily just trying to recreate the swing. Yes, we are going to talk about rotating the hips, but what we have to do is take these different components, sort of break them apart, train each of them, and then knit them back together, potentially using exercise, but certainly in a skills environment, which would be out on the tennis court. So what we will do now is get into part number 2, which is building endurance. Building core endurance is as simple as just making your core be able to last or be able to function for longer without fatigue. Now, again, this isn't something that people might see as sports specific for the simple reason it doesn't recreate the movement, but it's a fundamental part that kind of stuff will sit on top of. Because if we don't have the endurance through here, if we aren't practicing that, then that's going to cause us problems further down the line or further down into the game we go. So what we have to do is first of all build this endurance. It's going to keep the spine healthy, it's going to keep the core healthy. So all we're going to do, we're going to use a plank, we're going to use a side plank, we're going to use a bird dog. Now with regards to the plank, we've probably done it before, but what we're going to try and do as well is practice bracing. Now this isn't going to be necessarily full bracing that you're going to use when you're swinging, but it's just training the brain to be able or to understand the bracing and the muscles that are used within that. So we come down and we just come into a plank, and all we want to do is embrace the abdominals here. So we're doing this consciously for no other reason than training our body to do it unconsciously. So we would first of all go into the plank and brace. The second part to it and how we would build the endurance is we're going to do it in little blocks. So we're going to do a 10-second block, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And you can kind of take that as long as you want to take it. I would recommend 1 to 2 minutes worth, which is somewhere in the region of sort of maybe 6, 7 or 8 blocks. So we would come down into this position, hold for 10, just pop the knees down for 5 and then back up for 10. Pop the knees down for 5 and then back up for 10. So that's going to take care of our anterior musculature. We're then going to go around to the lateral musculature. Then we're going to come down into a side plank. We're going to go into this position. We're going to do the exact same thing and then come down onto the knee or even pop the hip on the floor. 5 seconds, back up for 10. So obviously this is going to get this underside, then we would come down. Obviously change round, do 6, 7 or 8 of those, however many you feel that you would need to. Swap round, do the same the other side. So we've done the front, we've done the side, now we're going to take care of the back. So we're going to do that using a bird dog. You could use a bridge, but that's more for glutes and hamstrings. If we want to get these lower back muscles, we would use a bird dog. So every time I would hold this leg and this arm, it's going to be going across the back, but we're getting, for the lumbar spine, we're getting the muscles on one side. Then we would hold that for 10, relax for 5, or just simply just change the legs over, which may take 5 seconds. We would come up the other side, and again, we're using the other side. So what we're doing throughout is we're going from one side, contraction, and then to the other side while the other side relaxes. And then we're constantly changing that. And that little break, all that is doing is giving the body an opportunity to remove fatigue. So it's going to speed up that mechanism because it's going to recognize it hasn't got very long. So it's going to speed up that mechanism. And then what's going to happen, once it's done that, it's going to start delivering, well, at the same time, it's going to start delivering oxygen and new blood into the area. So again, it can carry on for longer. If we just stay in a plank and hold it, it doesn't release and bring as much new in. So that relaxation period is where it releases and brings in, releases, brings in. So again, it's training the body to become more efficient at that mechanism. Part number 3, we're talking about tuning the core. So where we've built some endurance, what we now need to start thinking about is that contract, relax, contract, relax. So we're going to start tuning that. Now again, as I've mentioned, this is training the brain. We're going to be doing it maybe a little bit more consciously, but it is going to happen unconsciously. Now this is going to happen a little bit harder than we would ever need to do it in swinging movements or in on the tennis court or whatever. But what we have to understand is the mechanism and how it works. So we're just going to use a plank with an arm raise. So we go into a plank, normal position. We're just going to have narrow elbows, wider feet. That's just going to give us a nice stable base. As we get better at it, we can bring the feet in and widen out to give us a more slightly unstable base. But to start with, narrow elbows, wide feet for a nice stable base. Then what we're going to do is we're going to lift an arm up. So it will be in this position. Lift an arm up, pop it on the lower back, put it back down, lift the other arm up, put it on the back. Now, throughout all of that, we want to be doing stable hips, centered hips, so they don't move. And that all comes down to the changeover. And what you will find is contract when we lift this arm up. Then as we put it down, this relaxes. As we pick this one up, this side contracts. So we're starting to tune that. Contract, relax, contract, relax, contract, relax. So what we do is we come down and we hold this position. What we can then do, slowly lift the arm up. So don't just jolt up because there's more chance of the hips moving. What we're trying to do is keep the centered hips. That's going to really make the core work. As soon as our hips move, there's a compensation involved, which is there because the torso muscles can't do the job that we're asking them to do. So they shift the hips to be able to do it. So we lift up slowly and we hold the hips in place. We then put down slowly, and then what we find as we change the arms and down, it changes sides. And again, we can do that as many times as we feel necessary. If you can't hold the position for very long, then maybe just do 2, 1 on each side. If you can hold it for longer, do 4 on each side, 5 on each side, 6 on each side, 10 on each side, whatever works. But what we've got to be able to do is it's more about the quality of the reps rather than the quantity of them. So it's very much about doing good quality exercise, good quality reps, getting that core to tune and do what we want it to do to be able to perform better, what will be at the next level, which we're going to talk about in part number 4. In part 4, we're talking about now rotating from the hips. So this now starts to recreate a little bit of the tennis movement. Now we're not going to try and create the tennis swing because there are many different types of them. You've got sort of overhand, forehand, backhand, lob, there's all these different types of movement. But what we want to try and train is the one fundamental part that goes with all of those is that rotation of the hip. So we're just going to be very simple. We're going to use a cable machine. It doesn't have to be heavy. The tennis racket isn't heavy, so we don't need it to be heavy. But what we are going to start doing is that whole contract, relax. Well, we won't necessarily get the contraction at the end because we're not hitting the ball, but we'll get the contraction at the start. But the main focus is that will, in some respects, happen kind of naturally because we've been tuning it with that plank and arm raise. So what we would then do, you can have one hand on it if you want, you can have 2 hands on it if you want. This may be a little bit more realistic for you, but again, we're not trying to recreate the tennis swing, we're trying to recreate the components that make it up. and one of those components is the rotation of the hips. So it's here, and then it's coming through and coming through. So it's really trying to tune that rotation from the hip and try and avoid rotating the spine and keeping the hips still, because this is where we're going to get the power from. So we can go from here. So we've done sort of a high to low. Again, we can come more horizontal. Again, I'm still trying to create that speed of movement as well, because that's another part of it. So it's that speed of movement, it's the rotation of the hips. And then finally, right down at the bottom, where we're coming through, you can change the position of the arms, where you can come through, you can come wide. So you've got those different variations of it, but what we're essentially doing is training that hip to come through more explosively. We've tuned the mechanism of contract, relax, contract, and we've built the endurance so it can keep doing that. So there is a logical system to all of this. And then finally, we can be a little bit more dynamic with a kettlebell. So we're coming through. So we're using the hips to push the kettlebell through, and we're not lifting with the arms. So there's no fatigue in the arms. It's all that hip coming through, trying to get the power from there, and then the arms are just acting like a pendulum to carry it through. But what the core is doing throughout all of that is contract, relax, and obviously as you hit the ball, contract. So we've taken all those different aspects of the sporting movement and we've tried to isolate it off, not completely because we're using different parts throughout, but we're trying to isolate it as much as we can so we can get the most from those movements, so we can then get the best of our sporting movement that we are trying to do. So that is the best exercises or core exercises and potentially core training for tennis players. So we've looked at contract, relax, contract, and we've used the sporting movement. Obviously, I've explained backswing, relaxing, initiating, contracting, hitting the ball, contracting. Then we've got building of endurance. That's just there to remove or reduce fatigue and start building us so we can last longer. Then we've got part number 2, which is tuning the core. So just tuning that contract, relax, going from side to side using the plank with arm swing. And then finally, we've got the moving of the hips. So we can use cables, we can use kettlebells, we can position the cable where we want, but essentially what we're trying to do is build that rotation of the hip, the contract, relax, contract, and the building of endurance. So we make all that unconscious, so when we go out onto the tennis court, you're going to be much more effective. Now, if you want more of a workout, more of a program, please just click the link in the below. You can go through my How to Build Core Strength and Stability program, which covers a lot of these points. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from Chris Uphold Training. I'll speak to you in the next tutorial.